Dozens of police officers of the London Metropolitan Police have stepped back from firearm duties and surrendered their official weapons. This comes after an official was charged with the death of an unarmed man. The UK's Ministry of Defence has stepped forward with military support to the Metropolitan Police Force. The row started after a fellow officer was charged with murder. This was over the fatal shooting of a young black man, Chris Kaba. The armed surrender move is a form of protest by the Met police officers. According to a report, more than 100 police officers have turned in their firearm permit. The Met Police Chief, Mark Rowley, said the current system is undermining his officers, while adding that his officers need better legal protection. The UK Home Secretary Suella Braverman has launched a review into the legal protections for officers. In a statement, Braverman said she will do everything in her power to support the officers. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Defence also received a request from the Home Office. It was a request for providing military aid to the civil authorities. The aid is usually provided to the police or the NHS in emergency situations like during the COVID-19 pandemic or the strike action by the border staff and paramedic staff. However, the MOD added that the military will not participate in a routine policing capacity. They will provide routine counter-terrorism contingency support to the Met Police. Police in the UK are not routinely armed, and the small proportion who carry guns are highly trained. According to the latest figures, there are nearly 2,600 authorized firearm officers in the Met Police. The latest controversy sheds light on controversies shrouding the Met Police. Essentially, a string of scandals in the force emerged in recent times. This includes the kidnapping, rape and murder of a young woman by a serving officer. Around 1,000 officers are currently under suspension or on restricted duties as they are being investigated for alleged wrongdoing and violence against women. For more on this, with me on the broadcast is Mike Buckley, senior journalist, political commentator and director, Independent Commission on UK-EU Relations. Thanks very much for being here on the broadcast. What's your initial reaction to the way we are seeing this situation unfold?
This is a very odd situation, of course. It is a concern to people in the UK, not just that those that live in London that are covered by the Met Police Force, but those across the UK as well. And obviously we want justice to be done where there has been wrongdoing. And that's for the courts to decide in the case of Chris Kaba, who was committing no offence, but was shot and killed, instantly. So these things cannot be, these cannot become the norm in the UK or indeed in any reasonable democratic or morally upstanding country. So justice does have to happen and a court case does need to be heard. But equally, on the other side, it's very easy to understand the concerns of police officers currently in the Met, but could of course be elsewhere as well, who will be thinking, well, goodness, if I'm just doing my job and I'm in a stressful situation and I'm told to do something or a mistake is made, will I also be taken to court for murder, or could that potentially happen? So it's no wonder that they have their concerns as well. So this does indeed put Suella Braverman, who is the Home Secretary, and the entire government in a difficult position, and they obviously have to work to resolve this. Currently, there's no sign of them coming up with any reasonable conclusions as a way forward on this, but the current situation where many police officers, I think about 100, have handed in their gun licences, and where we may indeed end up with military on the streets, this is not tenable. So a way has to be found that does not endanger the public and that ensures that justice is done if something happens that is potentially criminal, but that also enables the Met Police and any police in the UK to go about their duties.
Right. What do you make of the fact that this could potentially also result in a sort of mistrust or a gap in terms of the trust between the people on the ground and the police personnel?
The trust in the police has been deeply harmed in the UK, even just in the last year, but certainly in the last few years. I mean, there have been a number of things. There was the murder of a young woman by a man called Wayne Couzens, Sarah Everard, she was called. That was during the pandemic, and he said that he was a police officer, reported her in the back of his car, said he was arresting her because she'd broken lockdown rules, and then raped her and killed her. There's been another police officer, I forget his name right now, who was arrested after multiple rapes. There's been a very recent case where a man was convicted of murder and served 17 years in prison, and he was then judged to have not committed the murder at all. Evidence was available at the time. This was not in London, this was in Manchester. Evidence was available and ignored for a very long period, and that does bring questions over the police who ignore that evidence, and it brings questions over the appeals commissions who ignored that evidence for a long time as well. And that man is now set free. But clearly there are questions that the police need to answer, as well as there's the simple fact that certainly in London, the Met Police, there's a huge proportion, I think it's maybe 20%, 19 or 20% of police officers who are suspended because they've been accused of some offence, whether it's attacks on women or it's another offence of that nature. It may not be quite that high percentage, but it's a big proportion of the Met Police. So understandably, the public in the UK are wary and newly mistrustful. I heard a stat recently, and I'm pretty sure on this, was only 9% of the British public now trust the police. And that's staggering because that is new, and that's not just from one incident. It's not just because of this one murder, for example, during the pandemic. It's a range of issues that have come to the fore in recent weeks and months that have made all of us question, well, what is going on with the police? And in the end, of course, this comes down to the government. We've had a government for 13 years. We've had a succession of Home Secretaries who've liked playing the hard man or the hard woman in their cases, and yet it just seems that the police force has just been falling apart on their watch.
Right. Like you said, it's difficult to say where things are headed at this point, but what is your assessment of the way in which the UK government is dealing with the situation right now with those Met officers stepping back from firearm duties?
Well, Suella Braverman has said, as far as I'm aware, is that she will stand by the police officers. But that doesn't mean anything. I mean, of course, it's her job to support the police, but it's also her job to support the public. And it's her job to ensure that police officers can do their duties without fear that they're going to be accused of something that they haven't done or that was just a natural part of their job. But it's also her job to ensure that there are police officers patrolling the streets, armed where necessary. Thankfully, that's rare in the UK, but it is sometimes necessary, so that the public are kept safe. And her simply saying, I'm going to support police officers, doesn't do anything to resolve this situation. And indeed, at the moment, the situation is not resolved. And as we've said, 100 odd police officers have handed in their gun licenses. That means that they're not doing that part of their job for a justifiable concern. I'm not suggesting that they've done the wrong thing, but they need to be reassured that they're going to be able to do their jobs in a reasonable way. But the public need to be assured, A, that there will be the police doing the jobs that they're supposed to do, but also that they will be held to account if, as in the tragic case of Chris Cabba, something happens, that the police officer in question is held to account and isn't just given a carte blanche to go and shoot people and nothing happened.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the updates on the move.